Hello everyone, welcome to another series of the IMPRINT Explained. And today we're discussing something very sad happened yesterday. There's a gas leak at the LG polymer factory in Visakhapatnam. And today what we're going to discuss is that we're going to discuss what is styrene gas and how what caused the leakage and what was the response of the government. Right till now, the gas leak has claimed 11 lives and more than 350 people have been hospitalized. The number is increasing as we count. Some people are saying it's more than 1,000, right? The Prime Minister Modi has already talked to MHA and NDMA regarding the situation in Visakhapatnam, and he says he's praying for people, right? Rahul Gandhi talked about the fact that Congress leaders and workers of that area, would basically provide assistance and support to the families. CPI also said, condolences. Amit Shah talked about the fact that it's very disturbing, and he says he's tracking it. Right now, obviously, the question is how the gas leak occurred and why the neutralizer did not prove effective in containing a leak is obviously need to be investigated, because styrene obviously is not poisonous and can only be fatal if inhaled in excess. Okay, so this is what styrene looks like. Right, so it's basically a phenyl ring that's a benzene ring, and it had lean along with it, right? Okay, and so obviously it is used in synthesis of plastics. It is stored as a liquid but evaporates rapidly, and so that is what styrene is normally is. So okay, let's start and do it in detail now. Okay, so what happened? LG chemical plant was ready to reopen after easing of lockdown, and 10 people died in gas leak. Okay, the gas leak was not plugged yet. 2,000 people in 5 kilometers were affected. 200 are in hospital, and this happened in the wee hours of Thursday. So it was 3:30. So the idea was we were thinking that it will reopen, but what happened was autopolymerization had already happened. Okay. On the other hand, Visakhapatnam use of LG polymer, where a gas leak did not have a clearance for a petrochemical plant for a substantial part of its operation between 1997 and 2019. Right. So again, there's not clearance for this. So obviously there's an issue with the state, regime of pollution control, etc. And obviously the Home Ministry of Andhra Pradesh really looks bad in this. Okay, so look at the images if you want to see this. So this is Jagan Reddy visiting one of the victims in family affected victims of the gas leak, right? And then there is people, just lying in droves in the hospital. This is a hospital ward, right? This is a lady who's lost conscious and is being ferried inside. And look at this guy, right? So you'll find, yesterday the images were really disturbing. People were lying in ditches. They were driving scooters and they fell off, right? It was as if suddenly they couldn't breathe. Okay, so what happened? Okay, so the gas leak basically is very sad because it's reminiscent of 1984. It claimed, obviously, as we talked about, 11 lives and thousands of residents in 5 villages in Visakhapatnam, obviously were affected. The plant was owned by, LG, right, at RRV Puram at Gopalapatnam, and this is about 15 kilometers from Visakhapatnam. What happened was several people for RRV Puram, Venkatapuram, right, BC Colony, Padmapuram, and Kamara Palem, but fell unconscious on the roads. Right, 6 died due to prolonged exposure, and another 2 died while escaping from the leak. Okay, now the question is it such a toxic gas? Right, the US based Centers for Disease and Control says that it causes tiredness, sense of inebriation, slowed reaction time, right, concentration problems, balance problems, and change in color. Right, so that is obviously one of the reasons I think a lot of people who were traveling, right, had to obviously they had balance problems and they fell. Right, short-term exposure leads to respiratory issues, eye irritation. So let's say if you have already existing issues of respiration, right, anxiety or something like that, obviously you will get affected badly. Right, so that is the basically issue. The number of studies, obviously, clinical neurotoxicity is low, right? Because it is not supposedly a really harmful gas. So it has to be inhaled in very large quantities. So that tells you of the extent of the leak in some ways. Okay, so what was the factory? As we know, LG Chemical Polymers. It was established in 1961. Originally, it was known as Hindustan Polymers, right? And it was doing the same thing, polystyrene. It was merged by McDowell and Cole of the UB Group in 1978. Then it was taken over by LG Chemicals, whom renamed it to be LG Polymers, right? And obviously, what it did was just make polystyrene and high impact polystyrene, right? Expandable polystyrene and engineering plastic compounds. Okay, that's very basic things, right? I would say it's a very straightforward process what they follow. There were 1,800 tons of styrene, right, stored in a tank, a capacity of 2,400 tons, right? And the gas leak happened when they were preparing to obviously reopen, right? So gas leak, half the gas leak before it was contained, which is obviously something very, very strange. That's what the DGP is also talking about. The idea is LG Polymer saying it's that the stagnation and changes in temperature inside the storage tank. So basically, if you think about it, it is the lockdown impact. Okay, right? Because of the lockdown, obviously the maintenance safety was ignored, right? And it led to auto polymerize. Let's talk about that. So this is what basically a benzene ring looks like. And if you put a CH2, this is what styrene is. Okay, right? Now, if you, a lot of you might not be aware of the concept called resonance, but what basically polymerization does is that instead of looking at it a double bond, think of it in a highly reactive state, and you can think of it as being a lone pair basically. So this is one electron here and one electron here. Now, obviously there are a lot of styrene molecules, right? So what would happen? So a polymerization reaction can occur. Okay. And what you can actually get is autopolymerization in all different directions. Okay, so what will happen is you will get something like this, right? Okay, and obviously this is what you were expecting. This is what you would say that this is polystyrene. But what happens is that it can actually go in various directions, right? It can, normally you would expect this to attack this, but it can also attack this, right? And that is why obviously autopolymerization already occurred. So obviously it was unstable, right? So hence this issue came. This is what basically, if you want to understand what is polystyrene, this is what it is. Now, what is styrene basically? As you know, C8H8 molecular formula obviously is pictured. We talked about it being a derivative of benzene. It's a liquid, and this is important, but evaporates easily. It has to be kept in temperature under 20 degrees. So this is a physical property. This is something I think you can obviously remember. It can come in objective types. Then obviously polystyrene is a versatile plastic. Obviously refrigerators of all of you might have LG ACs, refrigerators, micro ovens. So it is there. Automotive parts of electronics such as computers, manufacturer disposable cups. I think everybody has used a disposable cup. Food packaging material is used. So styrene is an intermediate to also produce copolymers. So styrenes and other monomers are used, and they are used in combo to make other type of copolymers, right? Polystyrene basically is a monomer, if you, in case you don't know. What is TBC? So TBC, what happened was, around 500 kgs of chemicals were airlifted from Gujarat and sent to Visakhapatnam. Okay, and there is something called a chemical called 4-tertiary butyl catechol. Okay, and this is an organic compound, right? And this is known as it is a stabilizer and a polymerization inhibitor. Okay, so this is what basically was supposed to be used, right, when the leakage happened. Okay, right. It is 25 times better than hydroquinone and 60 degree for polymerization inhibition. It is an antioxidant for synthetic rubber, polymers, and oil derivatives. It can be used for obviously purification agents. It is basically a solid crystal, and obviously 85% solution in water or methanol is used. Okay, so the idea was to use this to inhibit and obviously don't let the auto polymerization or even breaking that, I would say. So what happens, right? I think everybody saw the pictures, what exactly happens, right? So remember, it's a flammable liquid, right? And obviously it's used for polystyrene plastics, fiberglass, right? It's also basically looked into, you can find it in vehicle exhaust, cigarette smoke, other things. But what happens when you are exposed to it? So what it basically does is peripheral neuropathy. Okay, right? So what happens is you lose your sense of balance. Okay, and if people also say it can lead to cancer if and depression in certain cases if there is a lot of polystyrene on you. And obviously EPA notes there is sufficient evidence despite several epidemic studies indicating that association might be there between styrene exposure and the increased risk of leukemia and lymphoma. Now as we're talking about what happens if someone is exposed to styrene glass. So as we talked about, exposure to styrene gas affects the central nervous system. So Dr. K. Vijay Kumar he says that breathlessness, respiratory problem, irritation, indigestion, nausea, transient loss of respiratory conscious, unsteady gait, giddiness, ये सब होता है इससे. And there was अगर short duration के लिए भी अगर you are exposed, it will lead to long term effects. So however, in people suffering from respiratory illness such as asthma, right, those who have chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases, उनको ये ज़्यादा problem हो सकती है. If you have diabetes or hypertension, you may have anxiety disorders. So this is there. So he says that it is a mucous membrane that is mainly affected by the exposure to styrene gas, and styrene gas leak causes acute breathlessness among many people, and a few of them even asphyxiated with it. Are there any long-term effects? People, as we talked about, leukemia and cancer can be the case, right? US Environmental Protection Agency, they said tests involving acute exposure to rats and mice have shown styrene to have low, moderate toxicity by inhalation and oral exposure, right? And obviously, kidney, nervous system, eye, nasal irritation, ho sakta hai. Liver, blood, kidney, stomach effect obviously have been observed. People who have chronic oral exposure to polystyrene. How bad is it, right? Because even today there was a news of a second leakage. Okay, so whether it is it's really unclear whether the deaths have due to direct exposure to styrene glass or to byproducts. So autopsy, say you will get better idea. So the gas is non-poisonous and it is fatal only if exposed to long duration. So that tells you that how much gas was leaked, right? Even maybe people might say the company is lying. There was a lot more, right? However, hundreds of people, children were exposed. Cases are high as the gas leak was detected at 3 a.m. Several crucial hours were lost because people were sleeping, right? So officials said they immediately began making announcements over speakers, but they feared that most people would already fall unconscious. So police had to actually break doors to get inside, right? Is it under control? It seems so, right? Luckily, because of COVID, we had a lot of oxygen cylinders, so obviously ventilators were available, right? When such a chemical, gas leak happens, it's a wind speed. Okay, so with the wind speed calculation, it was now estimated then that 5-kilometer radius was affected. What was the government's response? Obviously, NDRF, NERI are on the ground to support the local administration. Jagan Reddy visited Vizag. So this is Jagan Reddy meeting the affected, and he announced an ex gratia grant of 1 crore, directed the Arogya Yasri Trust to cover all medical bills of the gas leak patients. And high-level inquiry was ordered, right? And this is reminiscent of the Bhopal gas strategy. And considering the fact we are, having a COVID lockdown, so people now would be worried, right? If COVID doesn't kill them, this gas leak might very, very sad, I would say. Thank you so much for listening. Do subscribe and like. Join our Telegram group for the PDF of the video. Thank you so much.